Good morning. Glad you all are here. What ages am I talking to? How old are you?
Ninth grade through 12.
9 through 12, okay. That's good, thank you. I'm gonna probably walk around and I'm not gonna just give a lecture. I hope that if you have a question, raise your hand and say something so that we can interact with each other. But let me set the context here. 1963, of course, none of you guys were living then. Some of your parents weren't living in 1963. 1963, there were 3.2 million people in the world. 3.2 billion people in the world in 1963. 189 million were in the US of A. That was the population of America in 1963. 1963, you could buy a brand new house, 3-bedroom family house for $13,000. You could buy a brand new car in 1963 for about $3,600. The average salary in 1963 was about $4,400 a year. In 1963, you could buy a loaf of bread for 22 cents, and you could buy a gallon of gasoline for 30 cents. How many of you all drive cars? Wouldn't that be great to get a gallon of gas for 30 cents today? You could go to California and back for a little nothing. 1963 was also a horrific year for civil rights struggles. In 1963, 5 days before we integrated Maryville High School, there was a march on Washington for jobs and freedoms. And that was August the 28th of 1963. And I remember sitting in my dad's room watching a 19-inch black and white TV of the March on Washington, and wondering how I would react in 5 days to going into a school that didn't want me to be there, and frankly, I did not want to be there. And so I asked my dad, I said, watching some of these young folks march, you know, they look so confident and so proud of what they're doing. I don't know if I can walk in that school and I can take the name calling, but I don't know if I can walk in that school and somebody walks up to me and spits in my face. I don't know that I can take that. And he said, son, you're gonna take whatever you need to take, because really it's not about you, it's about those that's gonna come after you. And of course, I had just turned 16 years old and I didn't quite understand that then. So in my mind, I was saying, I'll show him. So on September the 3rd of 1963, myself and 3 other black high school students left the little segregated school of Hale High School, which was about 1.5 miles from Maryville High School. And we walked up the street and was met by a police cruiser, one in front and one in back. And they led us around to the principal's office. Now, we went through a bunch of students standing on the side of the road, some in cars, some hollering, some cheering. They weren't cheering for us. They were cheering saying racial slangs and things like that. But they walked us into the principal's office and we sat down. The rest of the kids went into the auditorium and they had prayer and they read scripture. And when the 8 o'clock bell rung, they went to their classes. We were still in the principal's office. After all the kids were in their classrooms, the hallways were clear, then they walked us to our classes, 4 of us. None of us was in class together, each one in a different classroom. There was 1 seat left in each class, and that seat was up front next to the teacher. So you had to walk in the back door, walk around all the students and sit down in your little seat up front. That was pretty scary for a 16-year-old. That was the first day. We heard the cheers, we heard the jeers, but we knew that we were there to get an education. And also, they had 2 lunch periods, so they could only divide us at least for lunch period. 2 of us would be in the lunch room at the same time. But we never had any classes together that first semester, and I don't recall having any classes with another black person that whole first year. But we endured, we went through that. When the bell would ring for changing of classes, we would hear people hollering, beating on lockers, things like that. So it was like you walking on eggshells, okay? You never know what was coming, and we fully expected to have some violence because we had been told that there will be some violence because '63 was a horrific year. In 1963, Dr. King was put in jail. 4 black girls at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was killed by bombs. Medgar Evers, who was the NAACP head in Mississippi, was shot and killed going into his house. So there was a whole horrific year, a lot of violence going on. The governor of Alabama, George Wallace, was elected, and he pledged segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. So we fully expected Blount County to be like that. One of the things I think we had going in our favor was that in 1956, Clinton High School integrated. That school was bombed in '58. So we're talking 7 years later that Maryville High and Alcoa and Sevier County High School all integrated in 1963. But one of the things that we learned and that we knew, that we was there for the generations to come. Now let me tell you a little bit about my segregated high school, Hale, H-A-L-E High School. It was a school of about 105 kids from the 1st through the 12th grade. And all the books that we had were like 10 or 15 years older than the ones they had at Maryville High. Okay, so we had to learn from those old books, but we learned from them. And we had teachers who told us that oppression and discrimination would not be an excuse for failure, that we could do anything any other student did if we had the material. So going to Maryville High School actually was a quantum leap, a leap forward in technology, a leap forward in literature and education, but it was also a quantum leap backwards because we went into a school system with no black administrators, no black teachers, just 4 black students. At that time, Maryville High probably had a student population of 500 or so, and it went from the 10th through the 12th grade. The 9th grade was at the junior high. So we had 4 black students in that crowd. And most of the teachers there taught the subjects, but you could tell that they didn't really care about us. They were more concerned that their jobs was not adversely affected. Because in the city of Alcoa in Blount County, there was Aluminum Company of America. There was no Denso, there was no big other companies around. Alcoa pretty much had the power. And the powers that be at Alcoa basically told Blount County that they would integrate the schools, and if there was any kind of violence, that Alcoa would pull that plant out of Blount County and move it somewhere else. So the ones in control did not want that to happen, and that's why they assigned the police escorts. Every morning at 7:30, we would meet at one of the students' house, walk across the hill to Maryville High School, and as soon as we approached the campus of Maryville High School, there would be a police car pulled, one in front, one behind, to escort us through the students and to the principal's office. Now, we did not want that kind of exposure, basically, but we took it. And most of the students went about their tasks of being students. So we never was attacked physically, but we did hear the jeers and all the name callings, things like that. Also during 1963, there were black water fountains and white water fountains, black restrooms and white restrooms. The White Star Line bus that ran around the county and took us to Knox County, we all had to sit on the back of the bus. If you got on the bus, you paid the same fare to ride the bus, but we had to go to the back. The movie theaters back then, you had to sit up in what we called the crow's nest. You had to go upstairs and sit upstairs. You could not sit down where everybody else sat. Although we paid 89 cents, that was the fare to see a movie, same fare that they paid. But we endured that. We went through that. And I graduated from Maryville High. And one of the things that I learned later on in life is that going through that kind of trauma, and it's not a good environment to learn in. It's not a good environment to feel comfortable because you're always thinking about what's going to happen next. There was an incident in one gym class where a cousin of mine, Tony Young, he was one of the four, was in gym class. And the one who was running the gym class was the very popular football coach at Maryville High School. And I don't know if y'all know about Maryville High football, but it is one of the premier programs in the state of Tennessee. And this football coach had a student basically body slam Tony on the gym floor and turned his head, and it happened 2 or 3 times, and they never did anything about it. And I know that God was watching out for me because I told Tony, he told me about it. I was in a different class. I said, well, I don't know why that happened to you, but I would not have taken that. He wouldn't have body slammed me 2 or 3 times with the coach right there in the class. So the Lord was watching out for me because he knew I was kind of hot-headed. I was not going to stand for that. Later on, this guy who did that, about 10 years ago, he called and wanted to know if he could get in touch with Tony so that he could apologize. He had become a minister. And when we told Tony, Tony said, no, I don't want to talk to him. There's nothing he can do about it, you know. In fact, Tony didn't want to even talk to us about that experience. We're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, folks. That's what happened. You know, I spent 35 years counseling veterans of war from World War II, Korea, Afghanistan, Vietnam, about post-traumatic stress disorder. I ran that program for the federal government. Well, we experienced that as students in a high school situation, post-traumatic stress disorder. But one of the things I learned when I went to Vietnam is that experience at Maryville High School was a lesson that taught me how to deal with stress. You know, when you're dealing with stress, you know, the anticipation of violence is really more stressful than the actual violence itself. Because when violence comes, you're going to know how to react one way or the other. But when you're constantly anticipating it, it's like walking on eggshells. You don't know when the shoe's going to drop. So it's more stressful. It causes you to make mistakes in thinking and training and doing what you need to do to counteract that. And I learned that. So when I went to Vietnam, what they called me in Vietnam was the Iceman. Because no matter what happened, things blowing up, things going boom, rockets coming in, whatever, I did not lose my cool. I was steady, I was constant, I knew what I was doing, I was trained to do, so I never lost it. And all kinds of folks around me would lose it and would not know how to react. So when the bullet starts flying, they're hopeless, they're helpless. They're laying there with an AK-47 or an M16 with 2 cartridges of ammunition, and they can't even pull the trigger because they're in shock. Well, going through the trauma of Maryville High School taught me how to react to trauma. And so that was a good thing for me. I went through that. I came back to the University of Tennessee. My major was mathematics But the Lord had told me when I came back from Vietnam that I need to be in a field where I can deal with people and interact with people. So I changed my major to psychology, and then I went into clinical social work, became a counselor, and then director of the PTSD unit for the VA, working with veterans with combat trauma. So I want to tell you guys, it's not where you start, it's how you finish. You can go through all kind of trauma, discrimination, whatever, but you still can take it. But you have to understand where you come from and what your goals are. And what I would like to do is to open it up for questions. I know you guys got questions. Ask about anything and I'll try to answer those for you.
Guys, if you've got questions, just raise your hand so we can kind of ask them in a kind of orderly fashion. And please, whatever you want to ask, I think you can tell from what you've heard, I don't think you're going to scare you. So. Question over here, Mr. Coffin.
Yes, please.
Was there anybody in that, when you were in Maryville, who was like at all nice, or was it just like everybody against you?
Yes, there were a few, and we could tell that they were kind of afraid to approach us at first. I still have contact with a few of those, but they would come up to the locker or we'd be in class and they would come and say, if you need anything, let me know. Glad you're here. Yes, there were a few.
I'm curious, with the experiences that you had and how difficult it was for you, as you had your own children and now on into grandchildren, how does it, I can only imagine you must have an interesting perspective when you're sitting out in the crowd watching your own children just walk across the stage and get a diploma, or your grandchildren get a diploma, and how much more difficult it was. I mean, how did that make you feel to see that as a dad and as a grandparent?
Well, first of all, I go back to what my father said, that you will do whatever it takes for you to do, because it really isn't about you, it's about your grandchildren and those generations who's going to come after you. And I've seen that come true in my life. It is about them. The friends they make, you know, and it's no color there. You know, it's the character, not the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So it makes me feel good that we know. So you can't legislate hate. You can change laws. You can teach people how to do things right and have them the same opportunities, but you can't make people stop hating. So by the interaction of my kids and grandkids growing up in a school system, but one of the things that's bothered me and still bothers me, and I still fight for that, is that there never was really any true integration. People talking about we integrated Maryville High. And I always try to tell them that basically what we did was desegregate Maryville High School. Because when you integrate something, what you do is take the best from this system and the best from that system and put it together. What they did was take 4 black students and integrate it into a white school system, but they didn't take our administrators, they didn't take our teachers. They had to find new jobs. Nobody at Maryville High that was white lost a job. Everybody that was black in the old school system had to go find jobs. Knoxville, Sevier County, wherever. They didn't find them in Blount County, they didn't hire them. So it was not an integration, it was an assimilation. So diversity is really important. When you leave this place, when you leave this county, and maybe not even in this county now, you're gonna run into all kind of people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. You're gonna be competing with people from China, Afghanistan, India, Japan, the Middle East, Africa. And you're gonna have to know what you're talking about and what you're doing. This is a global community now. And so you need to start learning that now. You need to start interacting with other people and other cultures right now. Anybody else?
How many people have tried to apologize to you for the racial slurs?
Over the years, I have went back to Maryville High School and spoke to the young kids there, and some of the parents have come in and they have apologized. And I accept those. But what I tell them is that it really You know, I have no animosity toward them because I've learned what I had to go through and I learned why I was there. But one of the things I haven't done, and I don't know that I'll ever do, is go back for a reunion. You know, reunions are supposed to be happy times. When you reunite with your classmates and everything. I have never went back to a Maryville High School class reunion. I don't think I ever will. None of the other four have ever went back to a Maryville High School class reunion. They invite us out to lunch sometimes as a group, as a class. We don't go. Individually, I have went out with several of my classmates. I still meet with some of them and we have lunch, we go out to coffee houses. But as a group representing Maryville High School class, I don't go to those. That's in the past for me. Yes.
You work with those who have PTSD. What is your strategy to help them through that?
First of all, when we started dealing with veterans with PTSD, nobody believed that it even existed, okay? And now you're looking around, PTSD is everywhere. In fact, in the DSM-3R that came out, the first thing about PTSD and to get a diagnosis that it had to be an event that was outside the realm of normal human experiences. Well, we know that that's not true. We know that rape victims have PTSD. We know people that's been in natural disasters and hurricanes and crashes have PTSD. And so the first thing we do is to validate that experience. Yeah, you saw some stuff that affected you. Yes, it was real, okay? And we try to walk through that, but you have to be real careful in how you treat somebody and what they've seen because you was not there. I have seen situations where somebody could actually get PTSD by hearing stories about the trauma of other people. And so we did group and individual counseling, we did family counseling, we worked with kids. There was a young man who had came to Vietnam. Within 2 weeks, he was put on a helicopter as a medic. And they were sent out to a hot LZ. Now I'm gonna explain to you what a LZ is. A hot LZ means there's no enemy out there, okay, they're fighting. Anything that moves, you can kill it, no questions asked. So they sent out this hot LZ to pick up some wounded. He is on a machine gun on the second helicopter. He sees these wounded Americans running toward the helicopter. His task is to watch the tree line, okay? As he's watching the tree line, he sees this young girl run out, black pajamas on, maybe 12, 13 years old. He could have killed her, no questions asked. When the Americans got on the helicopter, this young girl jumps on the helicopter blows up, kills everybody on board. He has PTSD. He walked in my vet center, and he had been on drugs and alcohol for years. We'd send him to treatment, it wouldn't work. That was his trauma that he had to live with, that he could have killed that 12, 15-year-old girl and all of his buddies on the helicopter would still be alive. So PTSD comes in many forms, in many ways. Any questions about integration?
When they desegregated Maryville High School, it seems like there's a lot of anxiety over just like even the trip there, having to walk with other 3 students, with the police escort going to the principal's office. I guess, how did that affect you? How did you get yourself up to go there every day with that happening? Was that your dad kind of pushing you to do it, or?
Well, first I didn't have a choice. I had to go. But the other thing was just prayer or church family. One of the things with the 4, and then there was a 5th student that came the last day of registration, but all 5 of us were members of the same church family. And we come from a historic church that had always been in the fight. The only black mayor in Maryville, Tennessee, 1869, was a member of that church, William B. Scott. He was the 2nd black mayor in the whole nation. There was one before him in 1868 in New Orleans. So that church has always been an activist church, okay? So we would have groups and they would talk with us, you know, and our faith kept us going. Because again, they said, you know, it's not about you, it's about those who come after you. And so that's what we were focused on, that we had to endure. But I prayed also every night that that cup would pass from me, but it didn't. Yes.
So you keep bringing up this idea, it's not about you, it's those who come after you. What do you think our students maybe are the people, like what can they be doing for those who come after them?
Pretty much the same thing. I think first you've got to understand that no matter where you are in this environment, this school system, it's not where you start, it's how you finish, okay? You still have a lot to contribute to this world, this society, all right? People will label you, they'll put you down for all kinds of things. Well, he came from a broken family. One of the things in the black community is that there are no males around. That was not my environment, that was not the environment of anybody in our church. All of us, both parents was in the home, both of them working, okay, supporting the family. So you'll be labeled, but you know who you are, and you can rise above that.
First, I want to say thank you for what you've done, your service, and everything. But can you talk about the differences between what you faced prior to going to combat and then when you went to combat? How much difference it is? Because I know you trust your brother next to you versus here at school and then when you're in a war zone. I don't think as far as like the racial difference and stuff, I think all that's usually one of them put aside. Is that something?
I missed what you said last. What was the last?
A lot of times, like, you know, you get sent to war, you gotta trust your brother. Doesn't matter. I think Colonel Hal Moore made a speech about that before they deployed to Vietnam. Can you kind of talk the differences, what you faced here versus going abroad?
Yes. Well, one of the things we learn, and you got to know that when you go to any kind of war situation, the military itself was not integrated until Korea, okay? You got to know that as part of the military, the American military, the people from the different communities and cultures went into the military, and so they carried that racism around the world, the different places. Same was true in Vietnam. There was places in Vietnam where I had to interact and deal with people waving the Confederate flags, going downtown Saigon saying that blacks could not enter this restaurant because of the color of your skin. So we had those kinds of fights, okay? But we carried an M16 just like they carried an M16, fully loaded on automatic. And so we dealt with those. But one of the things that we did do is that we understood that we had to combine and be together. I remember when General Powell first came to Vietnam, and he stepped off an airplane, and there was a bunch of black soldiers there, and they were giving up the dap. Now you see people in every sport, they give the dap. That came from Vietnam. That was a black soldier saying, hey brother, I'm a part of you, you're a part of me, we're together. And when we go back to the world, which was back to the States, we're not gonna put up with this anymore. Things are gonna change one way or the other. And so you see the football players, basketball, everybody's giving the dap now. That came from Vietnam. But when you're in a war zone, when you're out there where the rubber meets the road, then it's you and me and this flag, okay? I never saw any racism displayed when the bullets started flying and the rockets and the bombs started going off, the napalm's falling. Everybody's trying to protect everybody else. It's in the rear, when they come back, that separation starts again. Yes.
Have you ever had to be in a physical altercation outside of war, like to protect yourself or anything like that?
Well, let me tell you about one incident when I first came back from Vietnam. And that's why I don't carry a weapon today, even though I can. I was coming from a club in Knoxville at 2:30 in the morning, back from Vietnam after 5 days. Stopped at a red light. There was a car behind me blowing a horn. I looked through my rear view mirror. There were 5 white guys in this car. So I decided that I'm not gonna move. Light turns green, I'll keep sitting there. They decide they're gonna get out of the car and come and make me move. And when one reached for my door handle, I had a .45 right in his nose with my hand, finger on the trigger. 5 days out of Vietnam, they got back in the car and left. I went home and prayed. Thank you, Lord. I got all kind of weapons, but they're at my house. I don't carry them. But now it's getting so crazy. I just saw where the governor's ready to let people carry weapons with even having a license. I mean, it's crazy out there. But I know how to use weapons. You got to be safe with weapons. But that's the only altercation that I've had. I've taken guns from veterans who walked in my vet center, knives, guns, long rifles. You know, the guys who know how to use them. One guy walked in there with an M50 machine gun, and he told me, he said, I brought this in here to you because I was about to go over here and shoot up McDonald's. And I took that weapon from him. So, it's real. PTSD is real. War trauma is real. Yes.
Outside of the school, what was the culture of Maryville like itself during those times?
During 1963?
During segregation?
Yes, pretty much separated. It's like, you know your place, they know their place. We had, my brothers and I cut grass, we carried papers, we did jobs, you know, but we knew our place. We knew where we could be, when we could be there. We couldn't go into stores to do certain things. We still had black and white water fountains and restrooms. So it was that kind of situation. When you walk in the store or bank or something, they start following you with their eyes, walking behind you to see what you were trying to pick up or whatever, you know. But we coexisted in that kind of situation. Yes.
So, when you were 16, you were told it's not about you. At church, somebody told you it wasn't about you. Can you identify a moment when you actually realized and owned that thought, hey, this isn't about me?
Yeah, a couple of times. That September, I think we had been at Maryville High maybe 3 weeks, and that bomb went off in Birmingham at the 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 black young ladies, 14 years old. That was an epiphany for me, that it definitely was not about me. They were killed because they were black kids in a black church, and the same thing could happen to me, you know, but it wasn't, yeah, it was personal in a way, but the fact is that it was the color of my skin. The other one was when John Kennedy was assassinated in November of that year. I was sitting in the library when the intercom came on and says, President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas. And it's like my whole world collapsed, you know. President Kennedy to us was like an older brother, right? He and Robert Kennedy is the one that had told Alcoa and the aluminum company in Pittsburgh that you got influence in Blount County and all these other companies that had influence. And these schools will integrate, you know, or we will pull any kind of federal subsistence that your company has. And so Alcoa told Blount County and Maryville that you will integrate and won't anything violent happen. And so when he died, it was like a member of the family being killed. And I remember they let school out early that day because they said that people were beating on lockers and some were running. And as I exited the library, and I can still see this guy's face, although I don't know what his name is to this day. But he ran past me at the library and he said, that N-word president is dead. That N-word lover president is dead, and he ran out the door. So they let the schools out that day. And it was hard for us to go back to school the next week. It was on a weekend. Anybody else?
I've heard you say, or what I'm hearing you say is that your identity really helped you face the trauma and build resilience because you knew who you were. You had those lessons instilled in you from church and your father and your family. I was wondering if you could make a connection between, or if you think that knowing your identity helps you build resilience to trauma and to different things, you know, because you keep going back to, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and you didn't take on the identity of your graduating class or of the different things going on, you're true to that. So, do you care to speak to that?
Yes, it does help, but even with the identity, even with the support that I had and growing up in that environment, I still had to come individually to my own identity. And I think Merva High helped me in that respect because, as I said, when I went into a war zone, facing death, not because of the color of my skin, but because I was there facing an enemy on his own turf. And so that was a different kind of thing, but I had to come to terms with who am I really, even though I had all that background. And that's why I say it's not where you start, whether you have that background or not, it's how you finish. You can do like anybody else can do. It may take you a little longer because you don't have that history, that foundation, but you can accomplish it.
Guys, is there any other questions? I want you guys to have an opportunity to ask, but also there's another group that's coming in, and I want Mr. Coffin to have a chance to get some water and all that good stuff before he moves on to his next group. So does anybody else have any questions? Please take an opportunity to ask.
What grade were you in when you went into Maryville High School?
Sophomore, 16 years old.
What were the years after that first initial year? What were they like for you?
Well, that first initial year was pretty rough. We didn't know this. My parents never told me this, but they said the administration had my dad was in the NAACP president at that time. In fact, he helped with the integration of Clinton High School because of that. But the administration had called them and asked them, could they tell the students not to come to prom because they didn't want any incidents or anything to happen, okay? And when he told Alcoa that, he worked at Alcoa, the guy from Pittsburgh sent down a notice to the Blount County School Board that those students are going to be students that can come and participate in anything they want to. It's on you to make sure there's no incidents. But I never wanted to go to prom anyway. Maryville High back then was called the Maryville Red Rebels. I think they still call it Rebels today, aren't they? But school jackets, it was all on the little trays in the cafeteria. But I was never a rebel in my mind. You know, I didn't want to wear a rebel jacket, what that represented. Yes?
Why is it important for our students to hear what you have to say today?
Because they live in a world now that's even more diverse than I grew up in. And they're going to be dealing with people with all kinds of cultures, religions, and backgrounds. They're going to be competing against them, working with them, and they need to know. It's important. There are over 7 billion people in the world today. In the United States of America, the population now is over 378 million. You can get on a plane in the morning, eat lunch in Japan, and dinner in Australia. So you need to know. It's important. Your very survival depends on it. Yes?
Did any of the teachers make say racist things?
No, not one. But as a student, and you know this when I say it, you go into some classrooms at Maryville High, I did, and I knew immediately which one did not want me there. I knew also the ones who said, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna teach this, but I'm not gonna take any extra time with you. You get it or you don't get it. So you know that. You just know it. But no, they're concerned about their jobs. They don't make any racial remarks to you.
Guys, if you would, please give Mr. Coffin a round of applause.
Thank you all for coming.